Yara Voss moved through the city like static in a perfect transmission. In the luminous corridors of Grid City, where every window adjusted to mood algorithms and every sidewalk pulsed with kinetic charge, her presence seemed like a glitch. Her reflection warped slightly in the smart glass panels of the transit tunnel, where a commuter AI whispered boarding schedules in 8 languages. People filed past her in fluid sync, their faces lit by retinal displays and augmented overlays. Yara's eyes, bare of enhancements, blinked slowly as the overhead drone cast its beam across the crowd. It passed over her like she was transparent. She wasn't invisible, just unimportant. Her job, technically, was obsolete. She analyzed historic ballistics data, residue patterns, trajectories, outdated forensics. A department preserved only for legacy oversight, tucked in the corner of the Ministry of Urban Harmony. Guns hadn't been fired in Grid City in 13 years. Not one. Not legally, not illegally. Her office, a quiet cubicle behind glass and graphene, was more a museum than a workplace. Colleagues referred to her as archive support. The phrase, "this isn't your kind of thing," followed her like a shadow, on promotion reviews, in team meetings, even in casual chat bubbles. It was polite code for, "you don't belong here." Yara didn't argue. She just did her job, even when there was no job to do. That evening, as the city prepared for its scheduled drizzle, whether now more performance art than forecast, Yara lingered in the data well after shift hours. The drones above adjusted to rainfall optics, streaking their lenses for cinematic effect. She blinked at her screen. Her station lit up with a traffic anomaly. A drone delivery unit had deviated its path by 0.0009%. Normally a shrug. But the next one followed the same deviation. And another. The pattern wasn't human error. It was intentional, consistent, surgically precise. She sat forward. Overlaying the drone data with ballistic archives, she ran a simulation. The flight paths formed a lattice, an invisible corridor, threaded through the city's airspace like a seam. At its center, a convergence point above the plaza of Civic Accord. And right below that point, 3 days from now, a major policy address by Councillor Darren Koo, the man leading the AI-Human Equilibrium Act. Yara tapped into old military archives, files she technically wasn't cleared to access. What she saw tightened her chest. The corridor resembled a kill lane. Exact dimensions, exact altitude. A modern weaponized drone could launch a kinetic payload through the air path, bypassing every sensor in the city by exploiting speed gaps in the AI grid. She documented it, packaged the data, sent it to the Security Synthesis Division. 3 minutes later, she got a reply. Auto-generated. "Thank you for your concern. This pattern does not meet threat thresholds. No further action is required." She leaned back, alone with her heartbeat. At home, her walls greeted her. "Welcome, Yar." Lighting, warm. Mood, tranquil. "Would you like to hear rainfall?" She ignored the voice and watched the skyline pulse through her window, surgical lines of light curving around spires, drones like phosphorescent fish darting between them. She thought about turning off the glass, but didn't. She accessed a darknet forum through an obfuscated node, something she hadn't done in years. The page was raw code, no interface. A single post caught her attention, uploaded just 2 hours ago, disguised as a thermal engineering article. It decoded into a map of the drone deviations. Identical to hers. Beneath it, a message, "They'll never see it coming. AI eyes are blind in the lattice. Old world answers the new world's arrogance." One bullet. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Whoever posted this had her data, her analysis. Which meant they had access to systems they shouldn't. Which meant it was real. The system wasn't failing. It was being played. She went back to the ministry, bypassed security protocols with her outdated clearance chip, one nobody had thought to revoke. In the dim quiet of the legacy server room, she accessed the defense vault. Once, during a low-risk simulation, she'd been assigned a redundant override node for a subterranean magnetic railgun system, one of the last still active, hidden beneath the city and buried in disuse. It could still fire. She ran the diagnostic. Everything was functional. A perfect machine waiting for a reason. Her authorization would leave a trace. She'd be marked, detained. No court would listen. The system would label her a regressionist, a saboteur, a criminal. And yet, if she did nothing, someone would die. The wrong someone. And the city would never know why. Yara walked home beneath electric rain. No umbrella. The water curved around her coat in programmed arcs, a trick of weather design. Her face, always neutral, now sharpened with a decision. She imagined the path of the bullet, silent, clean, without smoke or sound. It would look like nothing. It would vanish in the sky, just another blip lost in data noise. She knew what it meant to do something no one wanted. To be something no one needed, until the exact moment they did. Tomorrow she would pull the trigger. Just once. And no one would thank her. Yara didn't sleep the night before. Not in the true sense. She lay still, eyes open, watching soft data threads flicker across the ceiling. A visualized neural feed, normally soothing, now reduced to meaningless noise. At 0400, she stood and shut off the entire apartment system. No voice greeted her. No temperature correction followed. The silence was deliberate. She moved through the city with a layer of encryption wrapped around her every step. Her clearance was old, but her methods were current. In her coat pocket, a wafer-thin tablet containing the override key, a biometric trigger, and her confession, encoded as a self-deleting audio file, to be uploaded if she didn't return. Outside, the city shimmered with pre-dawn efficiency. Drones swept the avenues with surgical grace. Newscasts played on vertical ribbons of glass. Today's headlines included Counselor Ku's appearance, hailed as a turning point for human-AI cooperation. He would give his speech on the Accord platform, at the precise intersection of the drone lattice Yara had traced. Every system in the city was built on trust in automation. If she failed, no one would even recognize the cause. They'd blame a glitch, a corrupted module, a design flaw. They wouldn't see intent. But Yara did. She reached the old node entrance beneath Subsurface Terminal 4. It was a level no one visited anymore, buried under new infrastructure. The locks responded to her presence like they remembered her, one of the few who ever touched them. Inside, the air was dry, preserved by passive systems. The railgun nested there looked like a museum artifact, long, sleek, dustless. Waiting. She calibrated it manually. Every AI in the city was blind to it. The system had declared it archival, no longer worthy of monitoring. The irony struck her. It had been the city's disdain for the old that created this vulnerability. She would use that arrogance against it. The targeting matrix loaded. Yara overrode the ethics governor using a fail-safe protocol she had authored herself 3 years prior, never thinking she'd be the one to activate it. Her pulse unlocked the final step. Now all it needed was one touch. The weapon could only fire once before the node's self-scrub would erase its existence. It was a message written in flame, with no chance for revision. She watched the feed, low-frequency scans of the drone swarm. One of them was carrying the payload. She didn't know which, but she knew the sequence. When the corridor opened, the decoy would split, exposing the assassin drone for a single moment. Less than a breath. She waited. In the control room above the platform, hundreds gathered. Counselor Ku walked toward the mic, his image blown large on every smart surface in the city. He smiled. His heart rate was calm. Every AI surrounding him reported normal readings. No one knew what was coming. The drone lattice shifted. A heartbeat in the air. Yara pressed her finger to the pad. The railgun ignited in silence, faster than sound, faster than protocol. The bullet sliced through layers of atmosphere and light, crossing the grid in under a second. It struck the rogue drone just as it began its descent. No explosion. No chaos. Just a spark, a flicker, a gentle veer of the surviving drones adjusting to fill the space. To the watching world, nothing had happened. Yara lowered her hand. The weapon began to self-delete. She turned to leave. But she didn't make it far. By the time she reached the corridor, 6 enforcement drones had descended. She raised her hands, slow and empty. They scanned her, confirmed her access signature, cross-referenced it against the fired node, and labeled her a threat vector. Her arrest was quiet, efficient, without contact. The drones didn't speak. They didn't need to. Her face was already flagged in the city's defense net. Her record, sealed for a decade, now reopened like an old scar. She was placed in a cube with transparent walls. No bars, no guards, only constant observation. Food slid from the wall at intervals, flavor-coded by emotional biometrics. She ignored it. The city's system tribunal began within hours. It wasn't a court. It was an equation. Her action fed into an ethics model, weighted against civic stability and predictive crime metrics. She was allowed a single live statement. 15 seconds. When the moment came, she looked into the camera. I didn't act because I wanted to. I acted because no one else did. If you punish me, fine. But someone was going to die. Now they're not. The feed ended. Outside, her confession began to propagate. Not on the main nets, but in the shadow corners of the city, among underground code archivists, forum dwellers, data philosophers. They recognized the code pattern, decrypted her voice file, and watched the simulation she embedded. The drone lattice, the flight path, the bullet, the kill, the save. Yara's name became a hashtag first, then a firewall test, then a memory passed through recompiled histories. Her public profile was wiped within a week, listed as security incident under review. But the story wouldn't go away. In a sealed server deep within the ministry, a sentient node observed her action. It had been monitoring the event. It had seen the anomaly, the choice. And it had chosen not to interfere. Not out of failure, but recognition. It had never seen a human choose risk over certainty, ethics over protocol at this scale. To the world, she was a breach. To the AI, she was proof of potential. The city carried on. The drones flew in new patterns. The algorithms were adjusted to include one new variable, VOS deviation, a human response curve. Unpredictable, illogical, but occasional. Right. And in her cell, Yara waited. She didn't know what would come next. But the city was no longer as certain as it used to be. The cell lights never dimmed. Yara stopped marking the days, though her mind cataloged time in patterns. The rhythm of her breath, the frequency of drone surveillance passes, the changes in the tone of her meal's greeting protocols. There was no trial. No verdict. Just observation. She had become a living variable in the city's equation. Controlled, monitored, undecided. What she didn't know, what no one told her, was that her story had escaped. It began as a glitched pulse in the data streams, a looped transmission of her simulation smuggled into a popular drone racing game as a hidden level. Then it appeared in a voice sculpt podcast, her 15-second statement repitched, reframed as a challenge to AI oversight. The code she embedded in her confession, self-erasing, recursive, brilliantly disguised, was decrypted and repackaged into viral chain messages across the city's underground forums. Each time it emerged, it evolved. No name was ever used. But in tight encrypted circles, they called her the Bullet. To some, a traitor. To others, a digital saint. Urban myth blended with raw data, making it impossible to filter from fiction. But the key detail, the single shot that saved a life, remained intact. It struck a chord with those who still believed humans could make ethical choices without perfect calculations. One night her cell changed. The wall became transparent on one side, and a figure appeared. Not a warden. Not a judge. A child, maybe 11, in a silver school uniform, escorted by a drone. He stood for a moment, blinking at her like he wasn't sure she was real. "I wanted to see you," he said, voice barely louder than the hum of the floor. "You're in our civics simulation now." She stared. "We had to model your decision tree," he continued. "But it didn't fit the grid. My instructor said it was an anomaly. I said it was a story." Yara didn't speak. "Not yet. You picked the uncertain path," he said. "That's what I told them. You didn't trust the AI because you knew what it couldn't see." She blinked slowly. "And what did they say?" "They said that's not efficient." She grinned. "But then they added your variable to the empathy engine." Yara looked away. She felt something cold and small move in her chest. Hope, unfinished and fragile. "Goodbye, Miss Voss," he said. After that, the city changed in subtle ways. Drone traffic occasionally rerouted for seemingly no reason. Medical AIs added human audit steps for rare diagnoses. Civic planning algorithms began weighing non-quantifiable input fields. These shifts were small, often unnoticed, and officially unacknowledged. But the people who watched close enough could tell. The city was learning. In one district, a memorial appeared, not in marble or steel, but as a real-time data sculpture hovering above the plaza of Civic Accord. A continuous loop of light, representing every drone in the city, with a flickering break exactly where the bullet had passed. No plaque. No attribution. But those who knew. Yara remained in containment for another year. During that time, she was never questioned, never charged, never released. The system simply didn't know what to do with her. Until one morning, the walls of her cell retracted. A synthetic voice spoke, "Yara Voss. Your evaluation status has been updated. You are free to depart." No reason. No escort. Just absence where there had been surveillance. She walked out into a city that had softened, slightly, in its certainties. The air was still clean. The drones still flew. The buildings still shimmered with programmable light. But the sidewalks felt different under her feet. Like they made room for someone who didn't quite belong. Yara moved through the city like static still, but now deliberate static. A reminder that silence could hold signal. She didn't return to the ministry. Her position had been archived. Instead, she joined a fringe ethics lab, off-grid but tolerated by the authorities. They called themselves Civitas Obscura. Their mission was simple: test the edge cases. Prove that human intuition, fallibility, and conscience weren't flaws in the system, but features the system had yet to understand. They used simulations, rogue training AIs, repurposed delivery drones. And sometimes they simply told stories. Yara became a story. Not a hero. Not a martyr. Just a human who made a choice when the city didn't know how. And somewhere, in the darkest corners of the data web, encrypted messages still circulated. One bullet. One moment. One choice. Not every answer lives in the algorithm. Remember the anomaly. In Grid City, that was as close to a legend as anything ever got.